Hey everybody, it's Karen Anderson here with Aortic Hope, and this is a super special live event. But before we get started, I'm going to ask you to please click like, click subscribe, wherever that button is on your screen, and click the little bell so that you get notified when we have other future live events such as this. But now we're going to move on to why we're here tonight. This is the second in our book reading series that we came out with this idea out of the blue, and we're so excited to have fellow survivor Teri Benson with us here tonight. Giving my round of applause. And she has written an incredible book. I don't know, do you have a copy there if you want to show it? How My Ordinary Became Extraordinary. And I'm glad you've got all those awesome bookmarks. We're going to have information on our screen how you can order your own copy. But there's so much I want to talk about with this book. Let me just say, I hate reading books. I've always hated it. I hate it more since my dissection, but I loved reading your book. And with our first guest, Maria Herrera, who had her book, which was different types of poetry, I was like, this is different. This is poetry. I'm used to Dr. Seuss poetry, but I'm getting it. I'm getting it. And then I got your book and I started reading it. I started reading it and I was like, this is really going to be very special in its most simplistic way. I was so hooked. I haven't been hooked on a book since 50 Shades of Grey. I have to be honest with you. And I was hooked. So before I get into anything more about me, making this about me, this is all about you. And I want you to why don't we just start off with you sharing a little bit about your story and what's going to connect you to the other survivors in the community. So tell us a little bit about you and you being in the community, and then we're going to jump into this book.
Yeah. At the time, it'll be 10 years in October. So I was coming up on my 50th birthday. So about this time of year it was, and I was realizing that I was turning 50, and I was all like, how is that possible? Like, I'm going to be 50, and I had just recently got divorced, and I thought, how is it that I'm single and 50? Two things you never think is going to happen.
Right.
So, because I'm like, isn't my mom 50? Whatever. So, yeah, and I hadn't taken, I'd always taken really pretty good care of myself, but through the divorce and everything had kind of put on a few pounds, nothing too major, but I kind of just then became like, oh my gosh, I've got to get in this incredible shape and I've got to like find a man. And, so I think I was having like a midlife crisis, being recently divorced. And so I started cycling, and I would cycle hundreds of miles a week, and I would run, and I would go to the gym and work out. And I literally was like in the best shape I'd ever been in. And I turned 50 on September 1st. And my friends and I rode around. There's a lake here in northern Utah called Bear Lake. Mm-hmm. I'm in Utah, by the way. And it's 50 miles around the whole lake. So me and my friends rode around the lake for my 50th birthday. And it was just like, I was just like, hey, I'm getting my life together, I'm single. And then the dissection happened. And I won't go into the details of that right now, but it's really interesting because my doctor said, because total combined, I think I had a 10-hour surgery, and then it was like a day and a half later, I had another 8-hour surgery. And right. He said, I would have never even taken you back in, because there's no way, had you not been in such good shape.
Yeah.
So, here the whole time I'm thinking I'm having a midlife crisis. I'm trying to get in shape. I was preparing my body to fight for its life.
Right.
And I just felt like somehow maybe I was prompted at that point to do that, because I would have never survived had I not been in such good shape.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just glad it didn't happen one day when I was on the bike, like out in the middle of nowhere riding, or I would have been roadkill.
Would have been bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's funny how you think you're preparing for something and it's for a completely different thing. So, yeah. So I've actually learned to listen to some of those little promptings now, because there's a really strong one about my dad in my book that, like, that truly, I think, is what saved my life. So, and I'll tell everybody about that in a minute. But yes, and I am now, like, I have three. I live in Salt Lake City, or Sandy, Utah. It's a suburb of Salt Lake, and I love the outdoors. And I've just always been an avid mountain biker and skier and road biker and just golfer. I love to do everything. And, it was after the dissection that my, doctor said, you're not going to do any of those things ever again. Like you won't be able to. And I was like, that just being told that you can't do or work or anything else, like,
Right.
what do you do? Like, what's your will to live? And of course I have kids that I wanted to live for, but you have to have other things in your life. So
Right.
like, I feel like my life just came to an end that day. So, and I kind of had to navigate a new one, which most of us know is not the easiest thing. So,
Well, just the concept of, Teri 2.0, as I'm sure you remember, Aaron Greenberg, he used to talk about that.
yeah.
And when he started talking about this, just the realization of hearing that 2.0, your new norm, it's just the worst saying, but it's so applicable. But it's
Well,
true, but
yeah.
it's hard to face.
Well, the interesting thing is that my life was totally sucked. I mean, I had a job that I hated. I had lost my house in my divorce and was living in a crappy little rental. I mean, like my life was just misery. Like I hated my job and I was just miserable every single day. And I was just trying to figure out my new normal, And so it's not like my life was great, but I kind of like afterwards kind of mourned for that because that's what I knew.
Right.
And then I had to figure out this whole new thing with, being, what do you call, compromised so much, health wise. But, I just longed and I thought, well, I don't want to go back to that crappy life. That was miserable, but it's all I knew. So yeah, you just kind of mourn because you don't know what the future looks like.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's crazy how your brain works.
Exactly. So did you want to read a snippet of this before we get into it a little bit?
You know what? I will, and then I'll tell you quickly too, before we get into it, why I wrote it.
Yes, please, because I am really interested in hearing that.
This happened in 2012, and mine dissected, and it was I didn't have an aneurysm. I asked him, I said, have I been walking around with an aneurysm, like, for a year or two? Like, I wouldn't know, like, I never had anything checked. And he said, no, there was no like aneurysm. It wasn't stretched or anything. But he said so it just happened like very quickly. And it tore like down into the root of the aortic valve. And so it was pumping, blood out into my body. And then it tore all the way down into my abdomen. And so, yeah, I mean, honestly, you look at it on paper and it's like, how did I even survive that? How do any of us survive like a dissection or whatever?
Right.
But so,
and when you talked about, because I reread that portion when you mentioned that you dissected into the valve.
Right.
So two questions. One, did you get a mechanical or a bovine?
I have what's called, everybody was asking me after, because I was for months, like so much like brain fog and because I ended up like flatlining for 26 minutes. And like, you just have some brain issues. They're still there. We're just adjusting.
Right.
My kids think I haven't changed a bit. But anyway, but yeah, just the whole, and I do have that brain fog still, like the whole conversation, but like you talking and you can't remember what you just said.
Well, we were talking to mention about your valve.
Yes, it's a, so everybody's like, do you have a pig valve? And I'm like, no, I don't have a pig valve. So I asked my doctor one day and he's like, yeah, you do. They call it like a freestyle, something about, so I'm like, I have a pig valve. So,
okay, so you do.
Anyway,
okay.
So I don't have mechanical, so I do have that, but I don't know the difference between the mechanical and I haven't done that much research between the two, but apparently that's what worked for me. So yeah, I'm sorry if some pig had to lose its life.
Well, the big difference is you're not on blood thinners and it's not loud. So that's a big, those are some big differences right there.
With what I have, I can't be on blood thinners.
Right.
So, or any anti-inflammatories or anything like that. But the reason why, so when I kind of like came to like realizing, because couldn't ever remember what happened to me, and
Mm-hmm.
I knew something tore, or if that was my heart or whatever. So I started like Googling like aortic dissections, and like it was a little horrifying.
Yeah.
Like I was like looking for survivor stories. I looked, like I feel like I looked on Facebook and couldn't, in 2012 I couldn't see anything.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
there was just, unless I was not looking in the right spot. And I just would Google and Google, like, survivors, and like every story I would read, it was fatal.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, so I started asking my doctor, I'm like, could I talk to other patients that this has happened to? And he said, well, I've done this for 30 years and I haven't had anybody survive this type of dissection before.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
sorry, I can't help you. So,
Right.
because I kept thinking, okay, so when can I run again? When can I do all this stuff again? And he's like, we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, and I don't want, it's not worth risking your life. He goes, and so he sort of like I was his pet project. Like he was trying to figure it out too.
You're his walking miracle.
Yes. So I kept thinking, and so then I kind of just started telling my story. And a gentleman I had met at a corporate retreat for the company I'd worked for before I had the dissection. He was like a motivational speaker and coach. You know how they bring someone into motivate.
Mm-hmm.
And I met him probably about a year before my dissection. And we became friends. And so we'd correspond back and forth. And we had become friends on Facebook. And every once in a while, I'd be like, hey, where are you at? Are you speaking? Blah, blah, blah. And anyway, we'd never met face to face. And my daughter started posting on Facebook after my dissection.
Mm-hmm.
This is what's happened, because she couldn't manage the phone calls. So she would give updates on Facebook. And he saw the updates and he called, and my phone, and my daughter answered, and he was like, what has happened to your mom?
Mm-hmm.
And so she kind of like vaguely gave him the story. So months after my thing, I was speaking with him, and he's like, this is like a book. You've got to write a book. And he's like, if you don't know any survivors, like there's got to be survivors out there, or people that have taken care of people that have died. I mean, there's got to be an audience for this story. He's like, it's an incredible story. You have to do it. Right. And, sometimes I think you put stuff out in the universe and people just come into your life to make it happen. And that's what happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I didn't know the first thing about writing a book. Last thing I wrote was a college paper in 1980. Come on. Like, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, and that was on a typewriter.
Mm-hmm.
So he hooked me up with an editor, and she kind of told me, just because I'm like, where do I start? And she goes, just start writing like what you remember. And you know what? I'm so glad, because I go back now and I've forgotten so much stuff.
Yeah.
Like I'll be, I totally forgot about that. And so this was about a year after my dissection, and it took me about a year to write it. Mm-hmm. But I felt like caregivers, and because I know it wasn't easy on McCall, my daughter, or my other kids, I know it wasn't easy for them. It's hard to be a caregiver. And I had to have, I know, like probably everybody else, had to have 24/7 care. I mean, I couldn't, lift my arms. I couldn't, do anything, So, and that's a humbling experience.
Mm-hmm.
You have to rely on someone for every need. Mm-hmm. And so you learn a whole bunch of stuff you didn't ever want to know, but when you have a dissection, like a lot of stuff. But I thought, I really need to write this book. So I just started writing. And then when I started writing, I wrote down all the things that happened right before. And like every star, every moon, every planet, every miracle literally had to like happen when it did for me to survive. Right. Like there was a series, like the ER doctor, like I come in there, I'm a healthy 50-year-old. I'm not a smoker. I've never had heart problems. I'm in great shape. Oh, you're just having like heartburn, that's what happens. That
happens every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And so just for the ER doctor to just as an afterthought, like just, hey, quick, before we send you home, let's do a quick CT scan. And
Mhm.
I thought it was completely unnecessary, like I was so put out. But, 2 minutes after that, then I'm headed to the hospital, the main hospital for open heart, emergency open
Mhm.
heart surgery. So it's like, and, it's like so many things happen. And I thought, I have got to tell all these things that happen because sometimes you're not listening. And I'm not a very good listener, but you have little, the little voices
Mhm.
and you just blow them off. And um, sometimes I feel like those are the things that end up saving your life or the life of someone else.
It's
You,
more than just the gut. It's the actual little voice. Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
So anyway, I thought we need to have a positive story out there.
Yep.
Like someone needs to read about. And I mean, I've had people reach out to me from New Zealand,
Mhm.
from like several places in Europe, and then a ton
Mhm.
of places in the United States. One lady said it was her husband that had the dissection. And she said the book helped me almost just as much as
And I
it
was
did.
going to bring that up because when we talk about why you did it, I wanted to talk about also who you were thinking your target audience would be.
Mhm.
Who is the target audience for this book? Because I have my own idea in my mind.
Right. Well, I actually thought it would be great for people that had had dissections, but that's actually a very small group. I mean,
Hmm.
overall,
Right.
like if it was a book about breast cancer, you're talking, it's huge.
Hmm. Hmm.
And, but just a survival story helps so many people in so many ways that I had no idea.
Yeah.
My thought wasn't that it would help someone through. I had a friend of mine, and he's about my age.
Hmm.
He's probably early 60s, and he was on his Harley and got hit by a truck and ended up having his like leg amputated, like one of his leg amputated through the
Hmm.
accident. And I took him my book, and he was like thanked me 1,000 times. Like it helped me so much just to get through my recovery, seeing what you had to go through for your recovery, and that you
Right.
did it, and it took a long time. Like my
Hmm.
recovery was like, I think full recovery. Well, I mean, to where you can be to what normal, but I the book is only stops at a year, but it was
Hmm.
about 2.5 years
Hmm.
for my recovery before I ever got on my bike again or anything like. So it's a long, grueling, hard recovery, and it's easy to just say screw it, I can't do it, like it's
Hmm.
not worth it. And so I've kind of found that it helps other people that are going through like some of these really hard, difficult things. Like
Well,
God,
let me say, I will tell you. You mentioned caregivers. This is such a perfect book for caregivers to get into the mind and psyche of their loved ones that they're taking care of because they only see surface because we know we don't, as I read that you did in the book, we don't share. We
no,
say, we got this. And then
no,
meanwhile, we walk up a staircase halfway and we're like, oh crap, I got all that to go and I can't go backwards. What do I? So
no.
they don't understand what's going on with us. And I would say it would be great to see a book. What would be a great follow up to your book is if McCall wrote a book. And I say that because what an interesting yin and yang. And to
Yes.
see this, and you do have this in your book. So people that get this book, you are not going to believe it till you get to the end and you listen to everybody that was involved in your life, their perspective. But I want to say one of the things that I thank you so much about writing this book is you said out loud so many of the private personal thoughts I had about myself. I sat there reading it like, oh my goodness, like our situations were different. I didn't have a second surgery,
Right.
but they were so similar.
Right.
Um, and then, but there was somebody saying it, what they saw when they looked in the mirror, how they cried when they were
Oh
in the shower. And I was like, oh my God, I never told anybody those
no,
private thoughts that I had.
no.
And, as I'm reading it, I'm like touching my chest. I'm like, oh my God, somebody gets it. And for the
True.
first time, as part of Aortic Hope and having these survivor series, and, and I tell everybody, oh, participate because you're going to help validate others. And
Right.
I never really, I mean, I always believe what I say, but this just reinforced to me again, like, wow, I am going through my experience while reading your book again, and I'm totally grounded. All I'm seeing is validation that what I felt, I was never the only one, ever the only one. That you, because this happened to you three years before it happened to me. And thank you for just being so vulnerable and just brutally honest with your thoughts about your experience. And I don't want to give specifics because it is just very powerful. And for people who have aneurysms, if they want to learn about the golden standard of care that they should be receiving, the questions they should be asking, the details they should be receiving, your book really goes over all of that.
Right. No, and it's, I just like it was, the crazy thing is that when the book was ready to just be published and, be out there, I said, wait. I'm like, I was almost scared to like have everybody know those thoughts and those feelings I had had, because I'm the one that's like, I'm good. You know what? I'm fine. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. I'm good. Don't worry. I'm just doing great. And, in the inside, I'm just like, I wish I would have died. Like that, because I did. I wished I had died for a long time because it was so hard. I just thought, why did I even survive? Like, what's the point? And, but I never said that out loud, of course. No, because I can't, say that to my kids.
Because we've got children. Right. Exactly.
Yes, those things that you never, like even when my kids and my family read my book, after they're like, oh, we had no idea you had these feelings. Like you never said it. And I'm like, well, it's hard because plus you're not yourself for a really long time. Like you're just in a really weird brain space.
Everything from when you would take your walks up the stairs and then getting comfortable just to sleep. And then, when you described making your sandwich or your cup of coffee, I can't remember what it was right now, and the shakes you had just to do that. And I was like, oh my, I can remember it was my second week being back from the hospital. I spent the first week with my mom and my dad, of course, because that's what I wanted to do. And the second week I finally came home to my husband, but he had to go to work. And everybody said no reason not to leave me alone. I should and could walk to a bathroom. I should and could get a glass of water. So when I got hungry, I was like, oh my God, I have to make a peanut butter and jelly. That is so involved. There's 2 jars, a knife from a different drawer, the bread. I mean, the mess I left was terrible, but
no, and
it's like, I can't even make a peanut. Then you go through I can't even make it. And then by the time you sit down, you're like, I'm too damn tired to eat it. And nobody understands that level of exhaustion.
Yeah. And horrible. I had to have 24/7 care. Yeah. Like I think it was 4 months that I couldn't be left alone.
Right.
And and that pissed me off.
Yeah.
I was angry about it because I'm like, I can do this by myself, and I couldn't. But, it's really hard to rely on someone, to really be vulnerable and just admit that you're weak and you can't do it. It's like, for me, that was really hard.
The first time,
super independent.
The first time you described leaving the store and you're like, I don't even remember where my car is. I had to put that book down. I was like, oh, it said the simple things. Like, I can remember getting in my car and like, which way do I live? I've not been living here for quite some time.
Yes.
And then the more you realize you can't remember it, then you become exasperated. Then the anxiety's like, who am I? If someone asks me my name, do I even know who I am? It's the worst. And that didn't happen just once. It happened more than once. And there are so many people that are going to be able to relate to that, because it's not just pump head. It's all the medication. It's the lack of sleep. It's the trauma that your brain has endured from being cooled on ice and on a machine. And you just take for granted until you've had this surgery. No other surgery can compare. No other experience can compare.
No.
It was amazing.
But, so, looking back, I think, okay, for the reason, of course it will help caregivers and it will help survivors, but it helps survivors of so many other things.
You are correct. 100%.
Because it's like, oh my gosh, it's a struggle regardless. It doesn't matter. And some people, and then I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people get, depression's a huge thing. Depression is a huge thing. I mean, my doctor, I had been on antidepressant since I had my daughter, and I think at the time she was 19.
Mm-hmm.
But I had postpartum depression with her, and I just kind of stayed on like that low dose of Prozac for years and years, just because it kind of just kept me there.
Yeah.
I tried to go off a few times, and it kind of like the dark cloud kind of covers
Right.
and follows you around. So I just kind of been on it, and I thought, oh, I probably don't need it anymore. So when my doctor was like going over my meds and stuff before I left, and he said, I'm going to up your dose of your Prozac. And I'm like, I'm probably fine without it. And he's all like, nope, you're not. He's like, I'm going to up the dose because you said you have no idea how this is going to affect you and you're going to need it. So I'm all like, yep, yeah, just, don't, I mean, people are like, oh, do you just hate being on it? And I'm like, no.
Right.
I mean, if I have to be on it, then great.
Yeah.
I'm not going to, worry about it. Like, it's just one more med that I take, from my little pharmacy.
Right, exactly. A little pharmacy. So we know why you did this, and we know what people have to gain, which you said it correctly. There's a book, and I can't remember the author's name, Lawrence Gonzalez. I don't know. I pull things out of my brain sometimes. He wrote a book called Surviving Survival.
Okay.
Yes, Surviving Survival, which or surviving surviving. So it's a combination of those words, play on those words. And the book is about a variety of people who have survived different things. It's got a shark bite, a bear attack, a bad divorce, horrible car accident, death of a child, you name it, all different things. And I read it early on, maybe a year after my dissection. Somebody in the community recommended it. And I read it and I was like, oh my, how could I have ever complained? Listen to these stories, the shark bite and almost a drowning. And I realized this is not about comparing. It's about showing you, look at what these people experienced, and look, not just the fact that they survived, but surviving the fact that you survive is a feat in itself, because there's survivor's guilt. There's the why me? Look what I put everybody through. And now life's different. And no, I'm not the same. And so there's all these emotions. And so in reading your book, it just brought that book right back to the forefront. So for anybody that's watching this, if you have anybody that's experiencing, it could be a health condition, it could be a traumatic event, anything where you need to really manage your life has now changed and you have to manage that. This is a great example on how a different way of doing it. Just very, again, brutally honest and right there. And I love that.
No, I just thought, if I'm going to do it, I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
Yeah, no sugarcoating. It was perfect. That was great. That was really great.
No sugarcoating.
Yeah.
Anyway, I did want to tell you, okay, this was the day. That's why I named it like How My Ordinary Became Extraordinary, because, this happened one ordinary day, like it wasn't, and then when I thought about it later, I thought, if that had been the last day, if I had actually died, like that would have sucked, because I just got up to a job I hated every single day. I just, I hated everything. I mean, I was poor. I didn't have any money. I was just scrapping for whatever. And I was like, how did I get here? And, it was like I just was miserable. And I think that would have been a terrible thing to just be like, okay, well, now you're done. I mean, you just had a miserable life. And, I'm like, there was no party. There was no farewells. There were no goodbyes. And, I mean, and most of the time you don't get that. I mean, you do on some occasions, but anyway, I'm going to just read you a little bit just about that day and how I made it to the hospital really quick. Okay. This is right at the very beginning of the book. Beeping filled the room, pulling me out of my sleep. No, I groaned, slapping the alarm clock. The red light displayed 6:30, the start of another day. But I felt like I'd only had an hour or two of rest. I finally slammed my hand down on the snooze button and silenced the horrible noise. 10 minutes later, I hit it again. Another 10 minutes, another snooze. After a half hour went by, I decided I should really get up. The thoughts of going to work made me groan and bury my head in the blanket. So much paperwork, so much mediocrity, so much ordinariness. I need to make a change, I said to myself. I need to find a new job or something. I needed something to revitalize my life. Who knew? I needed something new, something challenging, and something very unexpected.
Or you got what you needed.
Hello. I wasn't expecting that. But anyway, I glanced at the clock and groaned again. First, I needed to get out of bed and take care of my responsibilities. Revolutioning my life would have to wait another week, maybe next week. After I forced myself through the morning routine and made it to the office, the day crawled like any other. I sat at my desk doing whatever I could to keep busy and watch the clock. I closed a few files and paid in full and prepared bills of sale to send to clients. I talked with coworkers, ate lunch, and did more work, and I made it through. When 5 o'clock finally arrived, I stopped at the gym on my way home to run on the treadmill. I considered skipping the exercise for the day because I was tired, but the routine was good for me, and I knew I'd feel better if I just followed through. I decided to run 4 miles of sprint intervals rather than my full workout. As I fell into the rhythm of the running, that allowed my thoughts to focus only on my movement. I felt some of the stress of the day melt away. Those few minutes of quiet solitude, just me and the treadmill, always gave me an energy boost and helped calm my mind. It was hard to believe that 1 year ago I was just starting this regimen, and now I had really become into the best shape of my life. Such a big change over a short period of time. It was a difficult period of time, definitely. Maintaining a workout schedule is never easy, but seeing results made it more worthwhile. I may have felt stagnant in every other aspect of my life, but at least I had my health, I thought. That evening, I was getting ready for bed. A small stinging pain erupted right in the middle of my chest, about the size of a 50-cent piece. I reached to touch it, wondering what it could be. Some kind of heartburn. What had I eaten earlier? Nothing spicy, but maybe it was just indigestion. It was uncomfortable, but I decided it would probably pass. I needed to go to sleep if I wanted to be awake for work the next day. After lying in bed for several minutes with the pain not subsiding, I started to feel a little irritated. It was late and I was exhausted, and I could see the clock ticking away. I had left before I needed to be. I had left before I needed to be up. It was taking away time that I had left before I needed to be up again. Yet the pain wouldn't go away, and my worries grew. Frustrated, I grabbed my iPad, like anybody else would, and I Googled stinging pain in chest. Nothing specific came up, but I found plenty of recommendations. See your doctor for any kind of chest pain, or go to the ER. By this point, it was 1:30 in the morning, and so seeing my doctor was totally out, and I was not going to go to the ER. I thought about other possibilities, but decided I was making a big deal out of nothing. This was ridiculous, I thought. Just lay back down, shut your eyes, and I was determined not to let the pain keep me from sleeping. I laid down, and I heard, "Get up." My eyes opened. What was that? Get up. Go put on your sweats and have McCall take you to the ER now. My heart started racing. I knew that voice. It was the voice of my dad, who had passed away 10 years earlier. I didn't know if I was actually hearing him speak or if it was just in my mind, but the stern tone told me that I needed to obey. And it wasn't a kind, reverent little voice. It was like my dad was yelling at me like I was 16 and I was in super big trouble. And that scared me to death, because I'm the type that would never go to the ER. No, like, I'm fine. I'm not going to go. And that scared me to death. And I thought, okay, I think I need to do that. Like, I think that's the only way I would ever have gone to the ER.
Yeah.
So my daughter had been home from college. She had come back and was staying for a couple of days, and she was leaving the next morning. So I went to find my 19-year-old daughter, McCall. She was still awake. I think it was probably 2 a.m. or something. And she was watching Netflix, or I don't know what she was watching. So I asked her if she'll drive me to the ER. She wasted no time getting up and getting dressed while I waited for her downstairs. While I was waiting, my middle child, Jace, my son Jace, came to see what was going on. "What's up, Mom?" he said, blinking the sleep out of his eyes. I blushed. I felt stupid when I had to say it out loud. Well, I have this dumb little stinging pain in my chest and I just want to go get it checked. I'm having McCall run me over to the ER. His forehead creased with worry. Should I come with you? And I'm like, no, it's no big deal. We'll be back in an hour or so. Just go back to bed. He nodded and returned to his room just as McCall came bounding down the stairs, her long blonde hair tied back and a sweatshirt hiding her slight frame. All set, she said, let's go. The drive to the ER only took about 10 minutes and the waiting room was completely empty. Apparently, it was a slow night for emergencies. How can I help you? Asked the nurse at the desk. I told her I had a small stinging pain in my chest, and while it was probably nothing, I just wanted to be sure. I know it's not a heart attack because I had had a heart attack. I think it was about 3.5 years before that, which was completely brought on by stress.
Mm-hmm.
So there was nothing wrong with anything. So I knew. And when you have a heart attack, you feel like you're dying because it's painful.
Yeah.
This is not painful. Mm-hmm. That's why I think people just have no idea because you don't know you're dying.
You're either painful or there is no pain. There's kind of this little gray area.
Yes. Yeah. But I feel like, guys, I had no idea that I was dying. So she's like, come with me, takes us back. She checks my blood pressure, which was normal. She had me change into a hospital gown. I reluctantly stripped down, wondering if I should have not bothered coming here. This was an awful lot of fuss for a minor chest pain. I refused to put on those stupid hospital non-skid socks. They looked silly. McCall tied up the back of my gown and I seated myself on the bed. McCall began folding up my clothes and sticking them in the bag I left. The bag that was left by the nurse. I laughed. McCall, you don't need to put my clothes away. We're not going to be here that long. She shrugged. I already put them in there. You can get them out later. A moment later, the doctor came in, listened to my heartbeat. And the one thing he did ask me is he asked me if I had a heart murmur. And I think that was like the blood that was like.
Yeah, they could hear it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, I don't recall it. And he didn't say anything. And he kept moving the stethoscope around, giving no indication of his thoughts. He goes, I want to have your blood work done. Okay. A nurse finally came in, drew the blood. The stinging pain started to grow worse. We waited some more. My daughter started to become a little frustrated and I could tell she was tired. So was I. And then I kept thinking this was a huge mistake. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to go home. He finally came back in and said, your blood work looks fine. There's no enzymes peaking. Blood markers look good. Everything's great. And I thought, good job. Let's just give me something for the pain and let's go home. He paused, but he said, before I send you home, I want to do a quick CT scan just to make sure. The nurse came back with a wheelchair to take me for the scan. She looked at my attire and said, you need to put on your socks. It's like, oh my gosh. I gave in, now thinking about something that I found even more unnecessary. I don't need a wheelchair and I don't need a CT scan. I can walk. McCall rolled her eyes. Well, I'm just getting the wheelchair so we can go home. I think we were both very irritable at that point. I sighed and complied, feeling ridiculous as the nurse wheeled me to the CT room. Really, this was all so much overkill. However, laying there listening to the machine whir and hum as it analyzed me, I started to feel the first flickers of fear. What if they found a problem? What would that mean? I blinked to clear my eyes. I would not cry. This was ridiculous. Nothing was wrong, and if there was, it couldn't be anything bad. Maybe just a minor complication from my previous heart attack. Nothing I couldn't handle. I'm like, I had no idea. I waited in the room with McCall while the doctor looked over the results. When he came back in, his face had a serious expression. He explained some medical jargon that I didn't understand, but his last sentence caught my attention fully. An ambulance is on its way here, and it's going to transport you to St. Mark's Hospital, and you need to have open heart surgery tonight. And then I was like, wait, what? Mm-hmm. Open heart surgery? Did he just say open heart surgery? And my mind just starts freaking out. You're going to cut my chest open? What does this mean? No, that can't be right. I mean, I just go on and on and on. As I panicked thoughts raced through my head. I tried to force myself to stay calm. I looked at McCall and swallowed. This can't be good. Neither of us laughed, and the tension in the room thickened. They started IVs in both my arms and put some sort of oxygen thing on my finger. We all know what that is. There was a red light on it, and I tried to concentrate on that instead of the fear that I was feeling. It reminded me of a science fiction movie. So I made up another attempt to lighten the mood. I raised my finger and showed McCall, ET phone home. And that becomes an important part later on because I can't remember when I wake up what had happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And McCall showed me because she videoed that.
Uh-huh.
And that's what kind of started my memory. She goes, "Don't you remember doing ET phone home?"
Phone home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then she laughed. It broke some of the anxiety we were both feeling. Um, I felt a little calmer. I would be fine. Everything was going to be all right. Got in the ambulance and my memory went blank. And then I woke up 5 days later. And that's when I thought my family, because I woke up and my whole entire family was in the room. Pre-COVID, of course. So, everybody's in there.
Right.
And I thought they were trying to kill me. I mean, I thought they were doing experiments on me because I was hooked up to a million machines and I had 19 IVs and I couldn't move. And I
lit up
thought,
like a Christmas tree.
Yeah. And so I thought they were there just watching me die. They were doing experiments on me. Your brain is so whacked out.
Yep. And that was just the first part.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's incredible. And I do appreciate you sharing that. And one of the things that you had mentioned before you read it was talking about how you were thinking about, gosh, what your last day could have looked like. And I remember, my last day would have looked like working, having a lunch meeting, and then coming home and watching the Ellen show. So it just gets you thinking about what that day was like.
I know. And
here's some of the things that I wrote down that struck me that I copied. When you said, as I thought about those ordinary days, I realized they were also meaningless days. They had no purpose. They were just ordinary. I didn't want any ordinary anymore. My recovery had made me realize that I wanted a different life. There was a reason I was still here, and I wanted to live up to it. I wanted to give people hope that this life was just a small part of our existence. Ugh. And I read that and I was like, oh, that's just, you want everybody to come away with a sense of that. You really do. And so explain to everybody, how long did it take you before you finally got to that point where you realized, I just want to give people that sense of hope?
Well, because I did have a near-death experience and I don't really write about it. I'm actually writing another book right now.
I was going to ask you because you touch upon it like this.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping she expands on the beautiful place.
I do. And I couldn't write about it for a really long time. It was very tender. And I mean, I couldn't actually put words to what I saw. Yeah. It was really hard for me. And I just was so emotional about it because I wanted to stay. I didn't want to come back. And I think that's a long time why I wished I had died, because it was it was beautiful. There was no pain. It was like, that's where I wanted to stay. I didn't want to come back to this broken body.
Right.
But I mean, I just, that glimpse also showed me that there is just a whole other life beyond this life. And this is just a tiny little bit. It's mind blowing. Like what lies ahead. And that, I have a whole different outtake on death. Yeah. My dad died of pancreatic cancer. So it's been almost 20 years since he passed away, and he was angry and didn't want to die and was scared of dying. And it just wasn't my time. That's all I can say. It just, because I literally just was pulled back like a huge magnet was pulling me back because I wanted to stay. Yeah. Some people are like, well, did you have a choice? And I'm like, well, I didn't know. They didn't, they just said, you're out. We don't want you. Go back, Yeah. But when it is my time, I'm great. And so I do, I mourn for people that lose people, but those people that go are great.
Inside.
Absolutely. I know. And it's like, they're fine. It's us that are left here that are like, that we have that sorrow and that we have that hole in our hearts. Right. But where we go, and that is a fabulous, it's something to look forward to, is what I'm saying.
The other thing that you had said was, I cried as I thought of how I'd meandered through the ordinary day that could have been my last. No thought of what was coming. no knowledge of the horrors I was about to face. I felt scared for my past self in retrospect, terrified of what I now knew. Part of me wished again that it was just a bad dream, but it wasn't. It was reality. Like all those nights of torture sleeping on the couch, I just had to endure it.
Yeah. No, it's,
Yeah.
when you become much more grateful for life, and obviously that,
Mm-hmm.
because you just, I mean, everybody's like, life is a gift, you enjoy and I'm just like, blah, 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 that's for everybody else, my
Yeah.
life sucks. And, but I just feel like that's kind of my thing. Like, never take for granted the magic of an ordinary day,
Mm-hmm. Because it
because,
can change and you
and
don't know which direction that changed. And there's a million different
no,
directions. You don't know how that ordinary day
right.
could just boom,
And
just
there's no,
change.
I mean, every morning without fail, I mean, I am actually so grateful when I can like sit up and get out of bed. I mean, it's been almost 10 years and I still am grateful every morning when I wake up. I am like, I literally thank God every morning that I can
Mhm.
open my eyes and I can get out of bed by myself. And I have a staircase behind me, and it's the and with the landing, and then so there's 8 stairs, a landing, and then 8 stairs.
Mhm.
And to this day, every time I get to the top of those stairs, I go yes, because
Mhm.
that was my Everest.
Yeah.
Like every time, it just that killed me, and I thought I'm never going to take for granted just walking up a staircase,
Mhm.
because it's just those
It's the little things. It's amazing.
little things.
And we hear people in the community talk about, oh my God, it's so hard and the recovery. And it's like you want so badly to have them realize when you picture that mountain, that even if you go up a little bit and it looks like it's daunting, how much further you have to go, if you just turn around and look how far you've actually come, you'll realize that every step, and even some days, if there's nothing, if that's what your body needed, that's a huge achievement in
Right.
itself.
Well, and then, like 6 months after, like I had to have a third surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that, like, just the post traumatic stress, I thought, I can't do that again. I can't do that again. I
Right.
can't, and of course it
Yeah.
wasn't nearly, and it ended up being better than he thought.
Mm-hmm.
And because he was going to actually cut me open again, but didn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
But so I went in thinking, I have got to do this all over again six
Yeah.
months later. And then, but it was a huge setback. And
Mm-hmm.
so then you have to kind of like now regroup again. And so it's
Yeah.
almost like you kind of take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, you know, but you just, but then when you look where you were,
Mm-hmm.
if you turn around and look, you're like, wow, I have come a long way, but that's not always the easiest thing to
Right.
do.
It
So,
is amazing.
yeah.
I want to
But,
check and see if we've had anybody leave any comments or make any questions. And
okay.
if you're not on with us live now, but you're watching this in a replay, feel free to leave a comment. Free feel to send us a message at info@aortichope.org. If you'd like to chat with Teri or ask her any questions, we'll get that over to her.
Yeah.
So one of our community members, Teri, is mentioning that another Teri, that one of the best things about this organization, other than just sharing these survivor stories, is being able to provide the support that I didn't see, nor did you in 2012, because this happened to me in 15. And while Facebook got really popular in 09, there may have been a page, but I don't even know if pages were really big back then for people
No,
to meet on.
I like looked everywhere. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I asked my therapist at cardiac rehab.
Yeah.
I'm like, do you know people that have, and they're like, well, not, we don't know anybody.
Right.
And
And
I'm like,
part of the reason why I think back then, and then I want to get to some more of the comments, that there weren't support groups, there weren't anything, it's because the knowledge wasn't there. So unless you had Marfan, Lowy Dietz, or Ehlers-Danlos,
right,
if you went in like you or I and we had a dissection, once you were fixed, they sent you home. They weren't, this is before us. They would just
right,
send you home, not
right,
realizing, well, why were these people dying in 5 to 10 or 15 years? Because they
right,
weren't being monitored to see if there were any other issues.
right.
And now we get to be monitored, and now people are surviving. Hence, we're having more support groups popping up.
Well, and the other thing I did ask my doctor, I said, because it was in 2012, I said, and these cardiothoracic surgeons aren't doing
Hmm.
dissection surgeries every week. Like
Hmm.
they're rare because he said, we're lucky to get someone that makes it here. Because when I was at an emergency facility in a suburb of Salt Lake, and they had to transport me to another suburb of Salt Lake, which was probably a 20 to 25
Hmm.
minute drive in an ambulance. But so he had time to see my images come in.
Hmm.
And he just happened to be the doctor that was there to do heart surgeries all day. And so he
Right.
ended up doing mine. But he had no intention. He goes, she won't even make it to the ER.
Yeah.
She won't even make it for 25 minutes. He didn't plan on even, that's how bad it looked, like
Hmm.
it from
Hmm.
the beginning.
Yeah.
And, but it's, um, so I feel like when I asked him, I said, how many dissection surgeries did you do? And he said, well, our practice, which is quite a few cardiothoracic surgeons, he says, we did 4. That was in 2012. They were able to do 4. And he said, yours was by far the worst of the worst of the worst case scenario. And he said, you were the only one that survived.
And now we have some doctors, like a friend of ours had 3 last week, just last
Yeah,
week. So
right,
aortic disease centers are having them more and more as people
right,
are now learning about this
right.
and checking their family history, and hopefully becoming aware if they have an
Well,
aneurysm. So they're getting checked out.
or like an ER doctor, like I had, like he had no reason to think that I
That's so
was,
odd. Yeah.
no, like I was like not, I mean, blood pressure, like heart rate, everything is
Right.
normal. And there's no
Yeah.
reason to suspect that I'm not overweight, I'm not a
Hmm.
smoker, I don't have
Hmm.
any other health issues. Like, why don't we just give you something for the pain and send you
Right.
home? And I
It
know
typically
several
happens.
people that it's happened. You
Yeah.
hear so many stories like that.
Yep. Yep.
So, just the fact that it was, a rare thing to have someone like survive, especially
Hmm.
the type of dissection I had,
Hmm.
is, like I just had no, like I just felt so alone. Like for so long, I just felt so isolated because, I had friends that had had breast cancer and they go to these support groups and like they just, and you just have some sort of hope or like camaraderie and, you
Right.
know, you have a
Yeah.
support system. I had nothing. Like
Yeah.
I just
Nothing
felt
back then.
so alone. I felt
Yeah.
so alone.
Yeah.
So,
Let's see what other comments we have real quick.
oh,
Okay. So Teri is also expressing that she is so excited and cannot wait to read your book. And so we'll see how many comments we get. Maybe Teri will be the lucky winner tonight of your book.
yes,
We'll see.
love to.
But um, so yeah, she's very excited to read it. And let me see, there were some other comments about open heart surgery. Let me get the other comments here. Okay. Okay.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
Velda was curious to know, she's trying to, I guess, to write her events down, and maybe hopefully Velda will turn into a book as well. I know
Yes.
I've wanted to start it too. And I think for a lot of us, part of the problem is just staying focused, staying on task. Did you have those problems? And if you did, what did you do about that?
It was terrible. I just get, because I got so overwhelmed so easily
Yeah.
because my brain, nothing. And then I'd start writing and then I would be like, okay, so I did have an editor and bless her heart, she was the reason I was able to do it because she would check up with me every week because I would
Mhm.
just send her what I had written, you know, and, sometimes it was like a paragraph. And then like I would just go like radio silent on her. Like I would just be in a bad place and I'm like, I can't do it. Like I can't think. Like, and I would go for like weeks. And then,
Mhm.
and I wouldn't answer her calls because I was like, I can't do it. And she'd like regroup. She goes, okay, just, do this. But it took me a whole year to write it.
So you
It
just
was,
piecemealed it. do it, then go back to it. Take a minute. And I would think also maybe just pretending that you're just telling somebody, one person, versus looking at the vastness of what could end up being your audience. Just recant it as if a doctor said to you, tell me what you remember happening. Boop, 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 boop. Type it out.
Yeah, and it's hard to relive it too.
Yeah, it is. And you were so close to your event when you started writing it, which is just amazing.
Yes, it was hard, but it was actually really very good therapy for me to do it, like to go and live it like that. It was the second hardest thing, is writing about it. First part was doing it. Second part was writing about it. So it's a difficult thing, but you just have to like stick with it, because it will be worth it. For me, I just think, and I think I might have told you, there's so many things I wouldn't remember today. Like I read my book sometimes and I'm like, oh my goodness, I forgot about that part. Yeah. How did I do that? It's just, I'm so grateful I wrote it when I did. And I also had friends and family help me remember too.
Which that's that whole last section when you talk with them is really wonderful to read about as well. Let's check and see if we have any more comments before the evening closes.
Okay.
So Velda is going to meet an editor. So hopefully that editor keeps you in check, Velda, and tells you, hey, next Monday, get me the next section. That sounds like it's the best way to do it.
No, you have to have someone almost force you, because it's hard. Yeah. It's a hard thing to do.
Well, I want you guys to message me who these editors are, because I've been wanting to make a book just before all of this on just my experiences with all my bowel resections and Crohn's and colitis. I feel like I'm a professional colonoscopy prepper at this point. But I'd love to just not even go into so much depth about my story, but I really want to talk about the evolution of aortic hope and just the evolution of my life and what a twist and turn it took. And it's just, even if I think about it, I'm like, oh my God, I mean, when it started, so daunting. But so somebody message me your editors. Let's talk offline. Okay. Let's see if there's any more comments. Well, that looks like there's 2 people tonight who have been participating with us. I know that you were going to do a book giveaway.
Yes.
So I say you go ahead and give that book off to Velda, and I'll take care of getting a book over to our friend Teri. So Velda, you know how to get in touch with Aortic Hope. Message us your mailing address. I know you're always messaging into us because you tend to be a big winner with our organization. And Teri will make sure to get that book sent off to you, and you're going to love it. You're going to love it. Teri, it was so great to get to meet you face to face.
Great.
I feel like I know your whole family. Tell your daughter I said hi.
I know. Everybody's all like, yeah, she was so great. And I'm like, I know, she saved my life.
To be so young. I mean, my son was just 15. He was, no clue of how traumatic it could have been. But yeah, it's some great stuff. Just great to see doctors doing what they need to do. Yes. Just so on top of it and so honest with you. I mean, honest when you didn't want to hear it. And just your honesty was just, I felt like I was watching it on a television movie. And I really, again, thank you for, at least for me, validating everything that I had privately been feeling and now felt the strength to say kind of out loud. And I felt like we were right there with each other. And even though I'm 7 years, reading in the book how you came out of this just a couple years later and now seeing you today, it inspires me to want to even make more out of every moment of my day to day. So thank you for that boost of inspiration.
Absolutely. Just be grateful for every day.
Every day. And we appreciate your time with us tonight. Teri Benson, How My Ordinary Became Extraordinary. Hold that gorgeous book up again.
Oh, here, let me take my sticky off. Can you see it?
Sherry Bradley, you are so welcome. We hope that you enjoyed this evening. And everybody, again, don't forget to hit subscribe, share with your friends, share with anybody that you think would benefit from learning about this book and learning about Teri's journey. And leave us a comment and we'll respond. Thank you again so much. Until next time, Teri, thank you.
See ya.
Everybody have a good night.
You too.